that there's a variety in there. We've we've come to know that, right? So if we go on the premise that they would like us to believe that all this stuff is all spontaneous, it all comes out of nothing, and in fact there's no order to it, why would you even why would you, it would be kind of pointless for you to try to study it. If there were no order, you'd be studying for nothing. Except if you were trying to prove some statistical probability, which again would have to go back to those logic laws that sometimes they want to deny. So I think if you understand my point, you can appreciate that. And then uh, realism. It's interesting to me that many times a lot of these folks who want to say, well, it's everything's materialism coming out of matter, uh, and well, some of the and if you talk to them long enough, you can ask them some questions. Well, some of them will say, well, we don't really know about that. We just have to, you know, if we study it long enough, we'll find it. And you'll probably hear, if you do a lot of reading into any of the atheists and the arguments. In fact, I think Stephen Hawking said it himself one time. If we just keep studying, we'll find it. We just need more time. We just need we need more money. We need more resources. Well, that's a good way to get a grant, but it doesn't make for a good argument that God does not exist. I mean, because we only have a certain amount of time. Generally speaking, 80, 90 years. Some of us live a few, longer than that. Some of us a lot less. But generally speaking, you're talking anywhere from 70, 80, 90 years. That's it. That's all the time you have. So all the money in the world is not going to buy you any more time than what you already have. If you just give us more time, we'll find it. We'll discover it. Well, that again is like going through all those bags of Skittles and M&Ms and trying to find the first time that either a bag is totally empty, doesn't have any M&Ms or Skittles in it, or that in that bag, which I have not really seen, they're all green or all red or all yellow or all pink or purple, and Skittles has got a lot of colors out there. I've never seen just one bag of only one color. So it'd kind of be pointless to look for that. Nevertheless, again, that would suggest that there was some order and there was some logic, right? Um, this idea of the uniformity and the causality. Most of the scientists, particularly those who had been arguing that the universe was eternal, uh, had a lot of difficulty when they kept finding that certain things were always existent. Going back to that uniform nature, and if everything was chaotic and all of this now ordered stuff came out of the chaos, why isn't there still all this chaos? So um, the idea then is that how do we study a thing? How do we formalize an experiment or a historical investigation? And then if you formalize it, then how do you conduct it? How do you actually conduct that experiment? And then once you conduct the experiment, then you have to interpret it. So much of the argument really is about interpretation, right? Because we all have the same evidence before us. So it's about interpretation. And, um, I think some time ago, I shared with you the probability of a sperm successfully fertilizing an egg, and for that fertilized egg to develop into a person, and that person be viable and able to exist alive, we came up with just a rough scale. I think I went through it with you, of something like 1 in 8 billion, right? 1 in 8 billion. It's a lot of zeros. So then if you think about 1 in 8 billion and you add to that, and here again is that additive part of, statistics and probability that I talked about. But if you add to that the probability that all of the millions of genetic code also have to align, right, in order for it to produce this viable human being, as we know human beings. Now we've just compounded, right, the potential for error, because when you keep adding stuff to the science, right, you keep adding variables, you make it possible for more and more error, more and more places for things to go wrong, right? And if that were the case, why are there almost 8 billion of us alive? And all those that existed before, because we're only talking about this point in time, right? There's roughly 8 billion people. But if we added up all the people that ever lived to this number, we would be, again, looking at a very astronomical number. So we'd have to believe somehow, or this is what they're asking us to believe, that this repetitive, spontaneous, um, catastrophic, chaotic stuff all comes together perfectly fine every time, 8 billion or more times, just out of nowhere. Come on now. Statistically, just in your own, you don't even have to use statistics. Just think about that, just kind of logically. In fact, if you have ever created anything, if you've ever drawn a picture, how many times could you repeat drawing that picture and get it right every time? Exactly as you drew it the first time. Unless you have a copying machine, can't cheat, right? You got to just sit down and draw that picture, whether it's a stick figure or a stick tree or a very intricate drawing. Could you sit down and repeat it 8 billion times and for it to be uniform? Consistently approximating the exact same drawing from the first one to the 8 billion one. And if you think you could, without making any error, then you would have to acknowledge that an intelligent being created those 8 billion drawings. In fact, we don't walk up to any books, any newspaper, or any hieroglyphs. Well, I don't think there's any Rosetta Stone fraction or papyrus out there that anybody ever stumbled upon and said, oh, you know what? I think all the elements were present in the atmosphere and it just poof came into being. And there it was. The very idea that we find those artifacts and we then draw what? The next conclusion is something had to cause it. And typically we determine that it had to come from a higher being. Now, if it had to come from a higher thinking, functioning being, some superior kind of intelligence, then what is to make us believe that we are the only intelligent existence being? Kind of arrogant, isn't it? Think that we're the only one. And even if we were good at doing it 8 billion times, would we also be able to keep all of the other elements in order while we were doing it? I mean, just think about it. When you make a cup of coffee in the morning or a cup of tea, are you doing it in the same way that you did it the day before? And even if you think you are doing it in the same way you did it before, if you were being studied and examined, you'd find that you were not doing it exactly the way you did it the day before, because you may not be doing it at the exact same time. You may not be using the exact same amount of water or tea bags or sugar or the same exact temperature of water or the same amount of water. You get the idea, right? So we can't be as intelligent as whomever this other intelligent being is that ordered and unified and created this universe with order. That person, that entity, that being has to be absolutely phenomenal. They've got to be so far superior to any intellect that we've ever come across. And then, oh, by the way, they also have to keep all of those things in order, right? The sun has to be in the right place, the moon, the water, the temperature of the waters, all those things have to be all done in the right way for a long time. And of course, there's arguments about how long we've been here, but that's another topic altogether. But nevertheless, the idea that God does not exist, or that some super intelligent, supernatural being doesn't exist, as you can probably see now, is a little bit preposterous. But if you hear the other argument that some atheists make and some other folks that disbelieve, they will come out with something like, well, uh, you know, you don't believe in Santa Claus, right? Or do you believe in Santa Claus? Right? You cannot make that same comparison, because we don't have any evidence for a Santa Claus. In fact, you don't have to be very old as you're growing up before you realize that, you know what, it's really not Santa Claus that's bringing these gifts. It's not a tooth fairy that put the money under the pillow, and the balloons and the lollipops didn't appear out of thin air, right? But we certainly do have evidence that there is not a Santa Claus. So here again is the idea. We definitely have evidence that there is a God. But there is dwindling evidence against the presence of God. The more you look into some science that is being discovered every day, you will find that to be true. So then, I think that's the premise of some of the questions that I had been getting. If you have any more questions, please submit them to me, and I'll try to address them. Or if I did not address them here adequately, you know, shoot me a message, an email, or in the comments during our live broadcast, and I will happily try to address those. So I've given you the list of scriptures that we will begin studying, and along those lines and along this whole concept of God, we will look at the Spirit of God, the fact that God is a spirit, and why did he leave us the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, so that we could be comforted and taught and guided, because he knew we would need that guidance. So until tomorrow, Saturday, at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I hope you are blessed, and I hope you find this discussion a blessing. I look forward to studying with you tomorrow, and until then, shalom.